I'm Vinnie Politan. We are live in Dedham, Massachusetts. That is the courthouse where the retrial of the century is taking place. 3 days of deliberations, no verdict, a lot of interesting notes from this jury, but we're getting ready tomorrow for day 4 of deliberations, and that is the subject of our investigation, the Karen Read retrial of the century and the death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. For those of you not familiar with the backstory, take a listen. Boston police officer John O'Keefe was found dead in the snow outside 34 Fairview Road in Canton, Massachusetts on January 29, 2022 during a powerful snowstorm. His girlfriend of 2 years, Karen Read, is now on trial facing charges of second-degree murder, manslaughter while operating under the influence, and leaving the scene of a fatal accident. Prosecutors allege that Read, after a night of drinking and arguing, dropped O'Keefe off at the home and then, in a fit of rage, backed her SUV into him and left him to die in the cold. O'Keefe and Read had been in a turbulent on-again, off-again relationship described by friends as strained and emotional. The prosecution paints Read as jealous and unstable, but the defense claims she is a scapegoat framed to protect others inside the house that night. As the trial unfolds, the case has drawn national attention, raising questions about justice, influence, and what really happened to Officer John O'Keefe that snowy morning. And we always have to keep in mind and remember, this is a murder trial. The top charge is second-degree murder. It's a boyfriend and girlfriend, a couple that were together for 2 years before John O'Keefe's death. So what was happening that day between John and Karen? Is there a motive for murder? What exactly were the conversations about? Take a listen to this. These are our producers reading some of the text messages between John and Karen that day.
You just lashed out at me and said terrible things. I don't know how you've gone to this point with me when I'm just trying my hardest. You made your point and continued to beat me down. I have a lot going on too. Physically, I'm falling apart and trying to get answers and help. I am just your girlfriend. I am not a perfect parent. I'm trying very hard and sometimes treat them nothing like I used to. I feel pretty about how this morning went down. I know you said sorry, but it really stung, especially when I've been trying pretty hard lately. I feel like a loser turning around, just coming back over after everything you said.
Not sure what else you want me to do. I said I'm sorry, and I was out of line. If you prefer to stay home, I totally get it. Things haven't been great between us for a while. Ever consider that?
So you're not into it anymore? That's fine. But I don't want to keep trying and you keep treating me like this.
Sick of always arguing and fighting. It's been weekly for several months now. So yeah, I'm not as quick to jump back into being lovey-dovey as you, apparently.
I've been trying to get over the hump with this arguing, and now you tell me you're not into things, and you don't want to fight weekly, but fly off the handle at 8 a.m. with me, like you're setting me up to fail.
They were fighting. And that brings us to the first question in our investigation tonight. And it's all about John and Karen. What were Karen and John fighting about? And was it a motive for murder? Joining me to help answer this question tonight, live in Dedham, Massachusetts, attorney Allie Crothamel and longtime Massachusetts attorney Rick Grundy, along with John DePietro, host and creator of Road Patrol Live, and criminal defense attorney Sydney Rushing. Great to have everyone here. Thank you so much for being here. Allie, what were they fighting about?
I think that they were fighting still about the Aruba trip, to be honest with you. So there were some issues before the Aruba trip. We all know about them. They weren't brought out too much in the trial, but all of the media has brought it out, and it was brought out in trial 1. And I think that was still weighing on Karen's mind. And let's be honest, guys, they had a toxic relationship. He was taking care of his niece and nephew. His brother has just died. That's very stressful. He took them in, right? And he has a girlfriend, right? So they're trying to manage this new family dynamic. That's difficult. Plus, then they have whatever happened in Aruba. So they're upset. They're They're PO'd, for lack of a better term. And this is normal. Like, from a defense attorney's perspective, I see this all the time. Toxic relationships. I do custody, divorce, family law, right? Everybody's fighting over everything. How many people do you know that are in a toxic relationship? That doesn't mean she's a murderer.
Okay, well, Rick, does this lead to a motive for murder? Is murder on the table here? Was there a reason?
I don't think that type of murder that's motivated by a bad relationship was ever put forth by either party. It was anger, drunkenness,
About what, though? About the fight?
I think it was a dissolved relationship. I don't think it was going to be repaired. I agree with Allie that I think two of the main reasons for that were, one, she came into a already made family, was trying to be a parent. She's middle-aged. She maybe doesn't want to be a parent, but I think there were strains there. And secondly, for whatever reason, whether due or not, she obviously was very jealous that he had an eye for other women.
Let's take a listen to one of the clips that was played for the jury, one from one of those Karen Reed interviews.
If you guys had really been going at it, and this was sort of like a last date element to it, was that going on?
That was not going on. John made it clear to me, I'm never breaking up with you.
All right, John DePietro, what's going on in this relationship? What are they fighting about? And does it connect to a murder charge?
I think there was, we got some insight into Karen Reed's mind with those texts with Brian Higgins, where she even said to him, you know, I think you're more like me. She also was kind of dismissive, saying that she didn't think John was balancing the kids that well. The Higgins situation also, if you remember, he talked about, you know, he approached her and she flew off the handle and started swearing at him. So you're talking about someone with a quick temper. She certainly, you know, that day was calling John incessantly. So I think it's a combination of the relationship. As the niece, I was in court when the niece testified, and John apparently confided to her saying that the relationship had, quote, run its course. So whatever it may have been, I think you just had two people the way out of the relationship as far as breaking down. She made the move on Higgins, and then it just all kind of exploded that night.
Sydney Rushing, what are your thoughts about the relationship and what was going on that day and that night?
You know, I think we have to kind of look at it as that both parties had some insecurities. John was upset that Karen had somebody come to her house to, you know, do some work, something that he could do or he wanted her to wait for him to do. So, you know, he had some jealousy indications as well. You know, she, I think, you know, showed signs of insecurity. I don't know any woman who hasn't gone through that where, you know, you kind of feel like, hey, things are different. You just kind of want reassurance. And she wasn't getting that. He was, you know, kind of just short with her. And she's like looking for those bigger, longer, you know, explanations. You know, John did say like he wasn't going to break up with her. We did have testimony from the night that they were at the bar and everything looked fine. They were lovey-dovey. So, you know, I think that they were just going through what relationships go through. Relationships go through ups and downs. And I think that this was just two parties maybe trying to, you know, figure out how they're moving forward. But they went there together that night, happy is what was testified to.
All right, let me ask you, Allie. Let's put this in context of what happened today with all these questions coming from the jury. Do you think this is an issue for this jury, that they're debating or talking about motive for murder, the nature of the relationship? Did she have a reason that she would want to run him over?
No, based off the questions today, it's my opinion that they're debating over the OUI charge.
End of story.
End of story.
How about you, Rick? Do you think this is still on the table with this jury?
I don't think the murder charge is. You know, if we wanted to add to the anger and at what level it rose, we could listen to those text messages allegedly immediately after. I'm sorry, the voice messages that she left immediately after the strike, the alleged strike. But no, I think the murder's off the table.
John DePietro, based on the questions that came out today, the issue we're talking about right now really is connected to murder. What are your thoughts?
Vinnie, I was inside the courthouse. It was very tense, roller coaster of emotions. I think it's either one juror that didn't think that the Karen clips, as we call them, that they were evidence. A lot of people took that to think that You know, maybe the entire jury was confused about that, but make no mistake about it, the clips they played of Karen Reed in her own words, if there was one juror or several that were confused that could be used as evidence, I don't think that's good for the defense. So I think manslaughter is still on the table, and I agree with Rick. I think the voicemails she left, that was great insight to what Karen Reed was thinking of. You know, you're using me and you're with someone else, and just that raw anger that she displayed.
Sydney, what are you thinking tonight? Is the murder still on the table based upon what we heard from this jury? Could they be debating motive? Could they be talking about anger? Could they be talking about a fight between Karen and John that night just before the alleged murder?
So, you know, I've been wrong before, but not often. But based on the questions that came out today, I think that they all kind of went together. The first three questions were about the the DUI. We have OWI here in Michigan. So the DUI, right? And they wanted to know the time frame for that. They wanted to know whether they could use the clips as evidence, and they wanted to know if they find the lower charge, if that makes it the higher charge is still found, you know, within there. There was a huge issue with that. Then that question came out about 1:30. And it was, if we're not guilty on 2 counts, but we cannot reach a unanimous verdict on the third, then, you know, is it a hung jury? Is it for all or just none? And I think that is super indicative of us that there's the 2 counts that they're not guilty on. And I think the one that they're definitely not is the murder, because they just don't have intent. They've never had intent, ever. You know, so I think that's definitely off the table. And I think the defense is sitting in a good spot, because even if the jury comes back and convicts on the DUI, that is a win in this case. And you can't tell me otherwise.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. Everybody agrees. Everybody agrees. Okay. Don't go anywhere. Our guests are staying with us, our experts. We've got a lot more to get to this hour. Coming up next, what did Peggy O'Keefe say to Karen Reed?
How was reacting?
He was very upset once we told him, because he slept over a friend's house the night before, and he just said, I'll never see him again.
Brutal murders of 4 University of Idaho students.
Oh my God, this doesn't happen here.
Detectives arrested 28-year-old Brian Kohlberger.
You could tell there was some off about him.
He was stalking them. He was hunting them.
Forget about motive. We don't even have a connection.
This trial will be on Court TV.
And I pray that we have justice.
The Idaho College Student Murders Trial. Live coverage begins this August, only on Court TV.
When they were upstairs, what were you doing?
I was trying to calm the kids.
Both of them?
But yeah, well, mainly.
How was reacting?
He was very upset once we told him, because he slept over a friend's house the night before, and he just said, I'll never see him again.
Peggy O'Keefe. This was a part of the retrial that was not a part of the first trial. She didn't testify in the first trial. There she is describing to her grandchildren that they've lost their 3rd parent. Think about trying to do that. I mean, unspeakable what the O'Keefe family has gone through. Absolutely unspeakable. Peggy O'Keefe is a witness in this retrial, and there was perhaps, depending on who you listen to, some interaction between Karen Reed and Peggy O'Keefe the morning after, right? When Karen Reed returns to the home from the hospital. I want you to take a listen to some of the testimony and evidence in this case that was presented to this jury about whether or not there was, in fact, words between Peggy O'Keefe and Karen Reed. Take a listen.
She says he's brought up to the Good Samaritan Hospital. Finally, they said, okay, you can go down. So we started walking down the corridor, and as I'm walking down, I hear Karen Reed yell, Peg, is he dead? Is he dead, Peg? Peg, is he dead? And I just kept walking.
And his mother leans over the kitchen island and says to me, I think it looks like he got hit by a car. It looks like he got hit by a car.
Did you ever confront the defendant with any accusations when she was in your home that morning?
I don't even remember her being in the house. When she went upstairs, that's the last I saw of her.
Did you ever lean over a kitchen island? Do you have a kitchen island in your house?
No.
Did you ever lean over the kitchen island and say, I think he looks like he got hit by a car?
No. I don't remember talking to her that morning.
Two completely different versions of what happened or did not happen in that home. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. What did Peggy O'Keefe say to Karen Reed? Nothing or something? And how significant is it in this case? How big of a moment? Still with me, live here in Dedham, Ali Crothamel and Rick Grundy, along with John DePietro and Sydney Rushing, who are also with us tonight. John DePietro, what are your thoughts about this issue and these moments during this trial, and how significant do you believe it is or is not?
Vinnie, I was in court when the defense was actually trying to argue to get that out of Karen Reed saying that in that docuseries. Peg O'Keefe, I actually have approached her, and spoken to her. I know the family, and she swore that she never said anything like that. But at the same time, I asked Mr. Reed, I asked Bill Reed right outside the courthouse, and he said that that conversation took place in front of the jury. I think it just highlighted that there was definitely animosity between Karen Reed and Peg O'Keefe. And people need to understand that Karen Reed was apparently in rough shape mentally at the hospital, and that's why, she was there and actually receiving some treatment, I believe. So, but at this point, I don't know what, I thought Peg O'Keefe was a strong witness. It was very emotional. And then obviously when the niece was on the stand, she's now being raised by her grandmother, Peg O'Keefe. It's a big moment when the niece looked over and Peg O'Keefe was kind of encouraging her. But at this point, it made a huge impression on me. Maybe it didn't make an impression on the jury.
Sydney, what are your thoughts about the impact of this moment and this issue?
So I think something that we can take away from this, that the defense handled Miss O'Keefe with class and respect. They didn't ask her any questions. They just said, I'm sorry for your loss, and moved on. I think that probably hit very well with the jury, too, because there's not really much they could question her on. They've got, the docuseries, Karen saying that this is what, Peg O'Keefe said to me, and then Peg O'Keefe's on the stand, and, she's clearly upset. And says that, I don't remember that happen. I don't remember her being in the house after she went upstairs. And then the defense, instead of going up there and trying to cross-examine her on that or say, well, you said this, didn't you? They just left it and just moved on. And I bet you that gave brownie points to the jury.
Rick Grundy, what are your thoughts about the emotional aspect of all of this, right? Is this something you believe that is impacting this jury? Peggy O'Keefe, she lost her son. She lost her daughter. She lost her son-in-law. She had to explain to her grandchildren. She has to raise them now. Does that reach this jury? Do you think it is an issue or no at this point?
I think in 29 days of testimony and a jury, like I give all juries credit, trying to find the truth, it has some emotive value, but overall, with respect to forming your decision, I think it's fairly minor. In every homicide case, we have to prove that there was actually this person existed who is now dead. And that's where you usually go to, is whether it's a husband or a wife or a parent. And they establish that, and they breathe some life, and they paint a picture of that person. And Peggy O'Keefe did a phenomenal job in that. And did that touch people's hearts? I'm sure it did. As far as Karen's response that they saw in the segment, that too, I think, was more of the same. More of Karen Reed coming across as kind of cold-hearted, snippy at times, and not cozying up to the jury's image of her. So I think on both occasions, it provided a little more of stuff that was there, but I don't think it's a big issue in the case.
And Allie, one thing that we sort of pointed out in these two moments, which were close in time to one another for this jury, is the contrast. Peggy O'Keefe crying all this loss, and that clip of Karen. Of all the clips, that's the clip that I think she looks the harshest in. What are your thoughts about the impact that that could have on this jury, or do you think it's water under the bridge at this point?
So I want to echo what Richard said. So basically, I think statements of the defendant in a homicide case are crucial, right? Especially if we have them on video or on a ring camera, things like that, right? So I think Karen's testimony or her documentary filming has a significant impact on the jury. They even asked a question about it today.
Right, is it evidence?
Is it evidence? So I think that's significant. For Peggy, she's a mom. She lost her son, and she's crying, and she explained to him more, in my mind, as a character witness. You know, this is who he was. This is what he looked like. You know, painted a picture, like Rich said, for the jury. I think her testimony is water under the bridge. But Karen's interviews, I think they're heavily considering that was one of the questions today.
Yeah. This is such a tough job for the jury. I mean, such a difficult case, so much evidence. You know, we go back to Peggy O'Keefe, it was weeks and weeks and weeks ago, and you wonder what they're remembering, what they're retaining, what they're arguing about. Our guests are staying with us. We've got more to get to. Up next, what did Officer Devers' testimony prove? I'm Vinnie Politan, and we are live outside the courthouse in downtown Dedham, Massachusetts, the site of the retrial of the century, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts versus Karen Reed. Karen Reed accused in the murder of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, and that is the subject of our investigation as we take a look at some of the evidence in this case and some of the witnesses that the jury saw during the course of this trial as they now get ready for day 4 of deliberations. One of the most memorable witnesses, because of the way the back and forth went, was a witness called by the defense who didn't want to be called by the defense. And we'll get to that in just a minute. Before we get to that, here is the story of Karen Reed and John O'Keefe. The night John O'Keefe died has become one of the most scrutinized in recent memory, marked by chilling uncertainty and fierce debate. Prosecutors claim Karen Reed dropped the Boston police officer off outside 34 Fairview Road in Canton, where he never made it inside and was fatally struck by her SUV. But the defense paints a far darker picture, one where O'Keefe did enter the home and met his end not in the snow, but within those walls. The core of the controversy centers on that unanswered question. Did he ever go inside? Surveillance gaps, conflicting witness accounts, and forensic inconsistencies have fueled a firestorm of speculation. Supporters of Karen Reed argue a cover-up is unfolding, while others remain convinced of her guilt. As the trial unfolds, the mystery of whether John O'Keefe stepped over the threshold of 34 Fairview that night remains a pivotal, haunting question and the key to unlocking the truth behind his death. And if you're trying to prove a cover-up or a conspiracy, you are pointing the finger at law enforcement. So how do you do that? How do you try to raise that in front of the jury? Well, one thing that the defense tried to do here was put a police officer who worked for Canton PD, now works for the Boston Police Department, on the stand in front of the jury. Again, someone who did not want to testify. Her name is Officer Kelly Dever. Let's take a listen to that back and forth, which, again, some of the most memorable testimony from this trial.
Did you tell those law enforcement agents on August 9th, 2023, that you saw Brian Higgins and Chief Berkowitz go into the Sally Port together and alone with the SUV for a wildly long time.
That was my recollection at the time.
So you did say that?
At the time, that is what I recollected.
Okay.
Given factual information that makes it so I know I did not, no.
So the answer is no.
Correct. Because of the fact I was provided factual information that showed a statement of mine was a false memory, it was not a lie. Therefore, I made it in good faith, and I retracted given information that it could not be accurate.
Did you tell the defense that when you were called up to the commissioner's office, he told you two things? Commissioner Cox told you, number one, the Boston Police Department supports you, and Officer Deaver, do the right thing.
So he said my name correctly. He said Dever, and
That's my mistake. Let's see, you want me to repeat the question so I get the
So,
name right?
Mr. Jackson, let's go ahead and answer, please.
yes, and he said nothing with the intent of guiding me one way or the
I didn't ask
other.
you what his intent was, madam. I asked you what he said to you. What were his words to you?
That he supports me.
And?
Just wanted me to tell the truth up here.
And his words were, do the right thing, correct?
I don't recall.
And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. What did Officer Dever's testimony prove? What's the takeaway for the jury from this testimony? Joining me live in Dedham, Allie Crothamill and Rick Grundy, both incredible attorneys. John DePietro, Road Patrol Live, and Sydney Rushing, another incredible attorney. Thank you all. Allie, what did this testimony prove?
This testimony proved shut your mouth and back the blue. Do the right thing. That's what it proved to me. It is a total, this witness in my mind was the definition of the defense case. Corruption, all the way from the commissioner down. That was the witness right there. Kelly Dever, however you say it.
It's Dever.
Dever.
John DePietro, what did this testimony prove?
You know, she did want to be there, obviously. I'm going to disagree with that. And I've mentioned there are a lot of young females on that jury. When people think of The Departed and they want to think of Black Mass and Boston corruption, she doesn't fit the profile for that. She was someone that made a mistake. She wasn't working there at the time. She gave it back to Jackson. A lot of the younger female jurors, they gave her credit for standing her ground and giving it right back to him. It was a very explosive moment in the courtroom.
How do you know that they gave her credit? Their face?
Tell you, if you're asking me the question, you could just tell the fact that this narrative of Boston corruption that you're trying to put through. Do you mean to tell me if you were going to do a film that she looks like someone that would be corrupt? She stood up to him. She threatened him because he was trying to pressure her and pressure into perjury. And you could see that the female jurors liked the fact it was a young female officer and she stood up to him. And there's been no evidence at all of any police corruption, let alone she's a Boston police officer, So now we're going into the Boston police. I thought we were just a Canton, Massachusetts State Police. There's been no evidence of any corruption with the Boston police officers.
So it's based off what she looks like, not what she's saying. And also, she went to the commissioner's office. How many police officers do you know daily get called up to the commissioner's office?
This is not an everyday case. She's a young officer. He was showing her support. He knew this is high profile. Her life was going to be on display. It's not so much about how she looks, although she doesn't fit the profile who you would think of, old Boston corrupt. But she went up there. She was found very credible, but she was given credit for standing up to him. They were trying to bully her and get her to change her testimony. She wouldn't do it. She's gotten a lot of points within the Boston Police Department. The Boston Police, I know. They a lot of high fives.
Go ahead, jump in.
Sydney, you got to back me up here, girl.
Yeah, I'm right there with you because I don't find her credible at all. You have a false memory of seeing these two people walk into the Sally Port for a wildly long time. You then go and tell investigators that same thing, and now conveniently you've been given information that makes this factually not possible. Factually not possible. While you were working as a Canton police department, or police officer, not while she was in Boston, while she was in Canton. And now all of a sudden she's not at Canton anymore. She's at Boston and being told to do the right thing, AKA what we know is back the blue. She is not going up there. She's changed her testimony. She is not credible in any shape or form. If anything, they're going to take her testimony and throw it out, because how do you say one thing and then say it's a false memory? False memory? Come on.
Let me ask you this, based on what we've heard from this jury, right? The notes from the jury today. Is the conspiracy on the table for this jury? Rick Grundy, let me start with you. Is conspiracy on the table here?
I guess I'd have to say, based on the notes, that it still is, because I'm not convinced that they've passed over the manslaughter, so that would be part of the conspiracy. So I would say yes. I would say, with respect to this witness, we just got rid of a Deborah up here in Boston too, you know. So, but this witness was the face of the alleged corruption, because at this point in time, the defense knew they weren't going to get Proctor up on the stand.
Proctor didn't show up.
So this was a live person that they could put in that position, and I think they took a little points away from them when they didn't get into the whole that they were going to charge her with perjury thing, but it was a live witness in front of them where they could make this point, and they did.
Let me ask you this: you're a prosecutor, or were?
He was.
Were. Do you believe that a defense attorney said to this police officer, "We are going to charge you with perjury"?
I don't know if he used the word charge, but I absolutely could hear them saying you would be perjuring yourself if you said this, that, or the other thing.
So my recollection of the testimony would be that she would be charged, and she was worried about that, and that's why she went to the feds. So my question to you is, if she's so worried about it, why is she so worried about it? Why is she asking the feds? Because she knows she lied, that she made up, it was a false memory. So do you really think the defense threatened her, or they just wanted her to say the truth?
I think it's very possible that they did threaten her, that they felt that they wanted to get her to roll over and say what you're saying, and so they threw the word perjury out there. She went to the feds because, well, I did say one thing, and now I'm saying another thing, so are you guys going to look at me like I'm perjuring? Particularly, I don't know how sophisticated she is, but when you're dealing with the feds, I could tell them my middle name is something other than what it is, and I just committed a crime.
All right, hold those thoughts. We've got a really big question to come to next, based upon what happened today. What impact did Karen Reed's alcohol consumption have?
Was the weakest vodka tonic. It was just a really weak pour, so I asked for a shot.
Coming soon to Court TV.
It's the biggest story that we're covering.
These murders have shaken our community.
He is the boogeyman.
So many eyes have been on Donna Adelson from the beginning. It's terrible. A social media sensation, now a suspected killer.
Why do you have something against me?
She wrote a children's book about her husband's death. Now she's accused of killing him.
The high-stakes trials you don't want to miss. Coming soon. Only on Court TV.
The final count of my alcohol intakes, probably about 5 or 6 or 4. The drinks that they were pouring me at McCarthy's, which is where I consumed most of the alcohol, was the weakest vodka tonic. It was just a really weak pour, so I asked for a shot.
All right, that is one of several clips, many clips that were played for this jury of Karen Reed talking about alcohol and drinking alcohol that night. As you recall, they were at C.F. McCarthy's, then they went to the Waterfall Bar and Grill. I want you to take a listen to more of the clips, because this was not a part of the first trial. It's only a part of the second trial. The clips, the media interviews that Karen Reed did. Let's watch.
And is the level of intoxication pretty high here for everybody?
It's happy.
Yeah.
It's
because you had a lot to drink, right?
I wouldn't say I have like a normal amount. Like a vodka tonic every 40 minutes.
Okay. And so are you feeling like buzzed? And I'm not judging, I'm just trying to get a sense.
Buzzed. I mean, I'm not as clear as I would be if I hadn't been drinking. I mean, I had drank.
When you walked out of the bar, how many drinks had you had?
I had probably about 4. And not 4 that I completed either. I didn't drink maybe more than a few sips at the waterfall.
And 4 drinks you felt fine to drive?
Yep.
How did you feel after that many drinks? When you got in the car, did you feel like you could drive? And did you feel how drunk up?
I wouldn't have gotten on the expressway. I wouldn't have gotten on the expressway at 12:15 on January 29th. I mean, it was quiet. The roads were very quiet. You can see it on the videos. And I was going, you know, when I've had a few drinks and I drive, I always drive extra slow. So I know my alerts aren't as sharp as they should be. But I shouldn't have been driving. But I don't think I was driving. I know I wasn't driving recklessly. I mean, I've got plenty of video of myself driving all over the place. I put my car in John's garage, which is incredibly narrow, and I had a very oversized SUV. You see me, there's a video of me driving through the intersection when we leave Waterfall to go to Brian Albert's, and I was always taught by my father, even when you have a green light, you always should tap the brake. You don't know who's going to run red. And I see me doing that multiple times between 12 and 1 and 5 and 6 a.m. So I know I was driving safely, not as safely or as alert as I would be if I had no alcohol. But I was not driving recklessly by any measure.
There was really more evidence in this retrial connected to Karen Reed's alcohol consumption. And we heard at least two of the questions directly related to Karen Reed's alcohol consumption from the jury, which brings us to the next question in our investigation. What impact did Karen Reed's alcohol consumption have? And what impact is it having on the jury as they deliberate? Still with me here in Dedham, Allie Crothamill and Rick Grundy, along with John DePietro and Sydney Rushing. Sydney, your thoughts about Karen Reed's alcohol consumption, the impact, and this jury.
So my thoughts are this, right? I don't think anyone can tell us what her BAC was during the time after she even left the waterfall, and all through that night up to the point of 5:01 when Carrie and Jen picked her up. Nobody can sit here and tell you how she did on field sobriety tests. Nobody can tell you what her BAC was at that point. We know that there was a blood draw done about 9:30 a.m., but we don't know what happened after she was home. We don't know what happened after she went to John's. There's a lot here that I just don't think that the jury is going to be able to reach a verdict on this. They may want to. They may think they're really thinking about it because of her statements. But the jury instruction requires that they find that she had a BAC above a .08. In Michigan, we have what's called operating while visibly impaired. You don't have to be above a .08 for that, but that's not here. She's got the DUI charge, which requires a finding of .08 or higher. And they don't have anyone testifying about what it was during that time. You can speculate, but speculate is not beyond a reasonable doubt.
John DePietro, your thoughts?
Vinny, I loved in closing arguments, Hank Brennan said what none of the Karen Reed supporters say. Karen Reed was drunk. She was drunk. He said it 3 times. She was drunk. In the voicemails, you hear drunken rage. But Hank Brennan said it right out there, and her defenders, her supporters, they never talk about it. She was drunk. She put the car in reverse, and she gunned it backwards. And it connected because the jury's thinking this is someone who was not in their right mind when she backed it up and gunned it and left him to die.
What was her BAC at
Allie,
that time?
what's the impact?
What was it?
Hey, listen, the voicemail speaks for itself, and the 9 drinks speak for itself. John O'Keefe's not here.
What's the impact?
What's the BAC?
So my thing is they're asking 2 questions about it, right, today? 2 major questions.
At least 2. The clips could be, they're asking if the clips are evidence. There were a lot of clips about alcohol consumption as well.
Correct. So they're asking it, they're debating it, right? So they're unsure. So to me, there's your doubt.
Interesting. Rick?
You know, I think the question for the clips was the one question that didn't seem, it was out there. The rest of them were formed following discussion, reaching a point where they needed some help along the way. That was a big miss. There was a lot in the Commonwealth's case put through those clips, and the fact that they spent 2 days deliberating, not knowing they were evidence or not sure of it, did they listen to it or not? So I think the fact when they were told, yeah, go ahead and listen to those, that's evidence, that may have a big turn on it. In Massachusetts, just so we're clear, you can blow below a .08 and still be prosecuted for operating under the influence. You can blow over it and go to trial and still be found not guilty. It's a presumption, nothing more than that. So, you know, but I think Jackson did catch them a little bit. They felt like, you know, this has just always been assumed. This was a lock that she was drunk based on her actions and the speaking and drinking that she admits to.
And I'm looking at the verdict form, and the verdict form does give them a choice when it comes to under the influence. Motor vehicle homicide by operating a motor vehicle under the influence and/or motor vehicle homicide by operating a motor vehicle with a blood alcohol level of 0.08% or greater. So you can get there without the 0.08% according to the slip on charge 4 and 5 of count 2. Okay? So let's get to a big picture question here. The big picture question. If this jury is asking so many questions about operating under the influence, where do you think they are, John DePietro?
I think they're leaning towards a conviction, and I think the words of the defendant bring her there. I mean, she's basically saying she wouldn't get on the expressway, and, you know, she was impaired. So I think there was a reason why Hank Brennan, in closing, stressed that Karen Reed was drunk, as he said.
Cindy, what are your thoughts? Same question.
So I think that, you know, they're looking at this and they're caught up. And this is the same thing that they couldn't decide on last time. There's people on both sides of this. And we don't know the breakdown. We don't know if it's more for guilty or more for not guilty. But obviously there's somebody here who thinks that they have not met their burden. Again, this is meeting a burden beyond a reasonable doubt. We have to keep in mind how high that burden is. So there's somebody in there, if not multiple, thinking that they just haven't met the burden on that. And at the end of the day, that's what they have to meet. And if they don't meet it, you know, comes back different.
Gotcha. 15 seconds from Rick Grundy.
So I find it interesting that the people outside of the jury room and the courtroom have just dug into whatever side they're on deeper and deeper. But despite all the extra money, all the extra time, all the experts, all the further development of the case, the jurors appear to be in the exact same place.
All right, 15 seconds, 10 seconds.
If we find her not guilty on 2 of the charges, I don't need to say anything more.
Okay. Don't go anywhere, folks. And when I say that, I mean it's a big day. Day 4 of deliberations. You can get a verdict first thing. You could get a verdict an hour in. At any point during the day, you don't know when it's going to happen, but you need to be watching Court TV to see it. I'm Vinnie Politan, live in Dedham. We'll keep searching for the answers as the investigation continues.